This interview is especially popular for the number of times that Cathy Newman asked her than Peterson. So you're saying.
So you're saying women have some sort of duty to sort of help fix the crisis of masculinity.
And read her own meanings into his words. In this video, I'm going to go through the questions she asked and break down both the questions, but also break down her answers, interpret some of the things he said, and give you my own views on some of the issues they brought up. She starts out this interview with an obvious question, but a relatively still fair question.
Jordan Peterson, you've said that men need to, quote, grow the hell up. Tell me why.
His first answer is thorough.
Well, because there's nothing uglier than an old infant. There's nothing good about it. People who don't grow up don't find the sort of meaning in their life that sustains them through difficult times, and they are certain to encounter difficult times. And they're left bitter and resentful and without purpose and adrift and hostile and resentful.
He goes down the list of things that could go wrong when men don't take responsibility, when men don't learn responsibility. So far, the questions are, again, pretty obvious, but they've been pretty good. She then goes on to say, so there's a crisis of masculinity, which is a fair question in relation to what he's already said.
I mean, that sounds pretty bad. You're saying there's a crisis of masculinity? I mean, what do you do about it?
You help people understand why it's necessary and important for them to grow up and adopt responsibility.
The interview starts going off the rails when she asks him, so you admit that most of your audience is male?
And it's mostly, you admit, it's mostly men listening. I mean,
it
90% of your audience is a male.
Well,
now, at this specific point is when you could see her switching into that new headspace. This is where the gotcha questions were supposed to start coming.
But does it bother you that your audience is predominantly male? Does that?
Why should it bother him?
Isn't that a bit divisive?
Every single product out there is geared towards a particular people. Her structure of this question is actually supposed to make a statement. She's not asking whether it's divisive. She's stating it's divisive.
Isn't that a bit divisive?
You can see that this question in of itself doesn't make any sense. Does the fact that this product is geared towards this set of people, isn't that divisive? That's not a question, that's an illusion. She's making a statement here. It's a leading question, if you would say that, or a loaded question.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's no more divisive than the fact that YouTube is primarily male and Tumblr is primarily female.
Isn't it?
Tumblr is primarily female.
But you're just saying that's the way it is.
It's important for, especially in these instances where the people are controversial, it's important that the conversation goes back and forth. It's not one side asking the questions. It's like one person has a gun and they can shoot at the other person, and the other person only has defensive mechanisms. Because then you have to explain yourself in issues that you shouldn't have to. That's not a question that should be answered. That's a question that should be returned back to her. Why? Why is it divisive? And she should have to answer. There are, especially when it comes to issues about masculinity, it shouldn't be divisive that conversations about those issues are geared towards men. That should be obvious.
What's in it for the women, though?
Well, what sort of partner do you want? You want an overgrown child? Or do you want someone to contend with that's going to help you and that you can rely on?
Women have some sort of duty to sort of help fix the crisis of masculinity.
You could see here that she frames the question in a way that would make it the most extreme, that would make it the most absurd, and pushes the question back at him. And again, in this format, he has to answer and be on the defensive instead of making her on the defensive, or at the very least, making her answer her own absurd questions. Now, as to the question as to why women should care,
depends on what they want. No, I mean, it's exactly how I laid it out. Like, women deeply want men who are competent and powerful.
Everyone should care about anything that affects a significant portion of the people we get to interact with. However, there are things that not everybody can do anything about. You can care about what's happening, for instance, in Afghanistan right now, but there's nothing you can do about it. So the measure of emotion and the measure of mental investment that you'd make into it would be vastly different from those who can actually do something about it. For instance, there are vets out of their own volition going into Afghanistan to rescue people. Why are they doing this? Because they can. So the mental and physical investment they'd make would be different from someone who otherwise couldn't do anything about it. Now, in this case, Women should care about the crisis of masculinity, but they should care mostly because it affects them downstream. It's like the crisis, even within women themselves, would affect men as well. Why? Because if you want a wife, if you want a partner long term, she's going to need to have certain qualities that would allow relationships to last long. While it's going to be of concern to men, and while men may make statements about it, the only people that can do anything about it are women themselves, and a lot of it mothers. Now, why does this matter? Why does it matter that men learn from fathers and women learn from mothers? Because we learn from what we see. A lot of crisis going on within men itself is birthed from the fact that their fathers didn't teach them. And that's birthed from the fact that, again, their fathers didn't teach them. Or, at some point, the change in our values affected our vision of ourselves and what the world is. Sometimes it takes such shakenings for men to learn, or even generally for people to learn new things, better values. But sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes we learn the wrong things. Sometimes we take back the wrong lessons from things that happen to us. And when that happens, then there has to be a reversal. But somewhere, somehow, we learn the wrong things and we teach that to our children. If a father is not home long enough, the son's not going to learn what it means to be a man. If the son doesn't learn, he cannot teach his children either. The cycle continues. If society at a point stops demanding and requiring certain things from men, then men fall out, especially when it comes to character. Now, you could argue that in terms of a man's role, it's changed over the last hundreds of years because technology has changed. And when technology changes, then the things required of us to survive change. And so our roles change as well. However, the character requirements have not changed. The character requirements of what it means to survive as human has not changed. So if those character requirements, those values are not taught to our children, to men, by other men, then we don't learn, we don't know. And so the things that we do are not going to add as much value as they otherwise would. And this is where this crisis is coming from. Peterson has actually stood in the gap for many men across the globe who have not learned certain values from their father. And that's why in African culture, they say it takes a village to raise a child. The reason is not all fathers can have the same qualities, good qualities and values. We learn from different places. We get exposed in different places. So we come back with different values. But once that is lost, if one father doesn't have it, usually another would, and they'd be able to teach the child. But what you have in the US and in many other countries, not to put the US on the spot, is a breakdown in community such that now you don't learn from each other. Now you learn from your friends, you learn from media. The values taught in media is built with certain incentives in mind. Build what's going to sell, not what's good for society. Because the people making those things, those movies, those shows, those songs, are making it with the design to sell. Profit motive. Think about Britney Spears. Think about many other artists that say that they've been fashioned in a particular way by their managers so that they can sell. So it takes for men to learn from men. And Jordan Peterson has become one of such men that has taught values to men that they otherwise would not know.
Women deeply want men who are competent and powerful. And I don't mean power in that they can exert tyrannical control over others. That's not power. That's just corruption. Power is competence.